Welcome to webinar 4 of the Transitions Passing the Torch. Today, we are talking about reimagining the communication model. On our panel today, we have 4 amazing people joining us to discuss what the communication model looks like in workers' compensation and what areas can we really make the most improvements from our direct scope of control. My name is Dr. Claire Musselman, and I am with Continental Western Group and the director of the Workers Recovery Unit, and I'm also one of the co-founders of the Transition. Joining me today, I have Robert Wilson, President and CEO of WorkersCompensation.com, Gregory Hamlin, SVP of Claims at Berkeley Industrial Comp, Todd Tams, Agency Principal with Tams Agency, and Dr. Lisa Fitzpatrick, CEO of Excellable. Will you guys each introduce yourselves a little bit more than what I just did? And Bob, we'll start with you first. Personality in the room today.
Yeah, I'm Bob Wilson. I'm CEO of WorkersCompensation.com. Been in this industry just over 20 years, and time flies when you're having fun.
All right, Greg, let's go down south. Sweet
All
home
right,
Alabama.
That's right. So my name's Greg Hamlin. I'm the Senior Vice President of Claims for Berkeley Industrial Comp. We are located in Birmingham, Alabama. I started my career in the Midwest in Indiana and have been in the insurance industry for about 15 years.
Welcome. Thanks, Greg. Let's go over to the West Coast before we come back to my home state. Dr. Lisa Fitzpatrick, can you say hello?
Hi, my name is Lisa Fitzpatrick, and I am the CEO of Excellable, and I'm here to really talk about from a provider standpoint on the communication end, and also my personal experience in dealing with a chronic illness and relating as a patient from the medical perspective as well. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And let's go back. Sweet home Hawkeyes. Here we go. Back to Iowa. Todd, welcome.
Hi, my name is Todd Tams. I'm the agency principal of Tams Agency. I'm more of a Go Cyclone fan in the great state of Iowa, where my daughter attends college. Third generation independent agent in the family business here in rural Western Iowa.
Who invited you to be here today? Not friends anymore. Just kidding. All right, so we are here as a result of the transition. So quickly, what is the transition? Transitions is a movement to help the workers' compensation industry. We had a group of like-minded individuals that came together to know that we could make the industry better from our scope of control. And from that, we have really focused on how to handle the influx and the outflux of overcoming the talent that will be exiting and hopefully entering during this decade. Our goal is to create a transition plan. So if you can look at, there are handouts for you for webinar 4. And if you've been following along since the first, there are handouts after every webinar or for every webinar, and then they are posted onto LinkedIn for your use. Our goal is that you actually create a playbook so you can take this back to whatever organization you are from, and you have a solid action plan of how to knowledge transfer and all of those wonderful little innate details that we are covering through this 13 webinar series. Whether the transition is up, out, across, down, side to side, we all have a part to play in this movement of really bringing up the talent within the industry. So the whole idea is that you are able to create a transition plan for yourself wherever you are within the organization. We have the handouts that are given at every webinar and also the PowerPoints that follow along with, so you can join us. You can also, if you missed one of these, we are being recorded, and these will be live on our YouTube channel afterwards. You can follow our LinkedIn page at The Transitions, join our LinkedIn group at the Transition Forum, or subscribe to our First to Know database, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, or you could do all of the above. The rest of our schedule at this moment, always subject to change depending on what other topics come about. But next up, we will be looking at reimagining influence and how to grow the next generation of leaders. And Jennifer Wolf and Heather Lohr of IAIABC will be leading up that, and the registration link is right there. So you can do that after this amazing session today. And then we will be moving forward with management style, business processes, technology strategies, marketing methods, human resources, imagining the work comp brand, And then creating the transition plan. What does it look like when we tie all of this content together? Our goal for today is to really help understand the communications process that exists within the workers' compensation space. So we're looking at the whole idea of applying knowledge and creating that human connection, regardless of which area that you sit within the workers' compensation space, which is why we have the panel that we do today. We're looking at the various system elements and what makes them work together or what makes their communication models fall apart. Our goal for you today is to help develop knowledge, skills, and really some serious judgment around the human connection and facilitation of how to get someone back to work, back to life, back to being a functional contributing member of society, and how we can all work collaboratively. I need some more coffee today, guys, of really pushing ourselves forward in this industry. Our goal is also that you will improve your communication, which I am apparently tongue twisted today, and of being much better at communicating orally and in writing to deliver effective and consumable messages for the parties intended or the parties that are involved within a workers' compensation claim. So we're going to start with section 1. We've got 5 sections today. Section 1, we're going to talk about the injured worker. So we are looking at this from a standpoint of how when an injured worker is injured and they are in this process. So Bob, I'm going to start with you. We've started to really look at a different type of, this is not just a work comp system, but as for our viewers, we also have a lot of resources that Bob really started talking about the idea of recovery, like back in 2011, and how the system needed to start changing its mindset. So Bob, will you start us out today talking about where this came from, what you saw, and why we really need to think about our communication with an injured worker?
Well, thank you, Claire. I appreciate it. By the way, despite the tongue twisting element, you did a very good job. I was waiting for you to tell me how many exits were on the aircraft as I, exit the aircraft. It sounded very professional. Yeah, that's exactly it. And the mask that could fall from over the head if I need oxygen. Anyway, the reality is a lot of the idea on workers' recovery really came out of the discussion forum on our website. We have a public discussion forum. It's open to anybody at workerscompensation.com, but it's dominated by injured workers. They seem to have a little more time on their hands than a lot of us. And a lot of the new workers that came into the system that were newly injured and very confused, and believe me, we have a very confusing process. That's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. They leave long stories about what happened to them and where they were sent and what the injury is, and they're confused and now they're home and they don't know what to do. But the question they almost always end with is a variant of how much will I be paid? How much can I make? How big will my settlement be? And it dawned on me that they were really focusing on compensation and not asking questions about how do I make sure I'm getting proper medical care? How can I get back to work? How can I restore quality of life from this injury? And it really dawned on me that it's our branding itself, workers' compensation, that leads everyone to file into that compensation mode. You file a workers' compensation claim. You're assigned a workers' compensation adjuster. You see a workers' compensation doctor in many states. If it's employer directed, you're going to see the employer's workers' comp doctor. And it really, we needed to shift. I felt we needed to shift in a complete branding paradigm shift to a recovery mode. You file a recovery claim. You're assigned a recovery specialist. You are no longer an injured worker. From day one, you are a recovering worker, and that's the way we refer to them. That sets a completely different tone and expectation for where these injured workers come from or need to go. And obviously there's a lot more behind that, but you're just setting different expectations out of the gate. And that's really where that developed.
So it's been 10 years since you kind of started that. Have we made any progress from your seat?
Well, it had nothing to do with me, but you're running the first workers recovery unit, which I think is tremendous. So I'm very thrilled to see that.
Okay, I did not tee that up for that. That was not.
No, I know.
Greg's going to poke at me about that.
No, in reality, I do know there are some states that have adopted the recovery focus in their training, internal training, state agencies. I know of one that is doing that based on some of those discussions. And the state of Washington actually has just rolled out an entirely new vocational, what they call the vocational recovery plan. And I was really complimented that at a meeting of a conference for their vocational experts, vocational counselors, they credited the push for workers' recovery as influencing that. And they've actually rolled out an entirely new set of regulations in Washington And it's all geared towards communicating faster, earlier, better, and getting those injured workers better supported and back into a functional role quicker. Quite often they would get into the rehab system a year or two after their accident. Now they can be in within 90 or 100 days, which is a significant improvement over where it was. But we have a long way to go.
So I couldn't agree with you more. All right, Greg, you get to have a lot of fun with injured workers because you oversee a claims group. Talk to me. What are you seeing from the injured worker side, and what do you do from your seat of how you impact kind of that worker's recovery and what you're doing from an injured worker standpoint?
So I think one of the most critical things that needs to happen really throughout the industry is adjusters who learn how to listen and show empathy, because I believe mindset has more to do with outcomes than almost anything else. And so when there's a partnership between an adjuster and an injured worker, those are the claims that really end up having the best results. And funny enough, really good results benefit everybody. They benefit the employer because they're back to work. They benefit the insured or the insurance company because you're going to end up paying less. But most importantly, they benefit the injured worker because they have fantastic outcomes. And so one of the things that, we've explored a lot of different ways of tackling that. One of the things that we have started to do is offer Take Courage pain coaching for some of our more difficult claims, because we believe that having somebody who can walk alongside you, who is a coach, to walk you through the difficult challenges of having an injury makes a big difference. And it's nice that that's a third party too. So it creates a little bit of a separation between the adjuster's relationship with the injured worker and gives them someone who's really working on helping them put their life back together. And we're exploring other options as well. I know Claire's team uses handwritten cards from injured workers, and we're looking at that. We're also looking at, maybe we send edible arrangements after a surgery. What can we do to change the narrative? Because so much of the narrative right now, if you turn on the TV with plaintiff attorneys, is focused on the bad relationship between how insurance companies are going to treat injured workers. And it's my belief it can be different. And then if it is different, we're going to achieve better outcomes.
All right, I'm going to go to Lisa. Lisa, you've been on the other side. Help us understand what it's like to be an injured worker.
Yes, so it definitely is difficult, and it has its moments, especially dealing as a medical professional and being a patient, and kind of, as Claire mentioned, seeing the other side, that you are somewhat forgotten and treated not necessarily as a person, but as a number. And instead of being asked, are you okay? How can we help? How can we, what resources are available to you? It's kind of getting you in and out of the system really quickly. And what I strongly urge from a medical professional standpoint is really allowing yourself as a medical professional to be more vulnerable, to share your stories with your patients, and then really sit down and listen to your patients and what they're trying to tell you. Really work on getting to the root cause of the problem and not just treating a Band-Aid approach with, oh, you have pain, let's give you pain medication, instead of seeing why do you have pain and what is contributing to that pain that's preventing that person from functioning. The goal is essentially for many of these injured workers is to get them back to work and get them back to functioning. But as the medical provider, if our focus is just a Band-Aid approach, they're going to end right back into the medical system where they started, if we're not fixing that root cause of the problem and really getting down to that deeper level. And then from the standpoint, again, of the injured worker, is really keeping that open line of communication between the medical practitioner and the patient and allowing them to reach out. So I'm a strong advocate of really utilizing technology, especially now with COVID and really the virtual platforms that are available.
So I'm going to round this out with Todd, and I'll render my own couple of thoughts on this. But Todd, you get to sit in a very unique space, and I'm really excited that you're here because most of the time we don't include the agents in the work comp discussions that we have. For some reason, they always get left out. When you look at any of the panels that we normally have, we don't ever bring the agent who is actually like a really pivotal part when you're working on like the carrier side. So Todd, from an agency perspective, what, I mean, you kind of get to be the catch-all in a lot of different ways. So where do you think we have a miss in the communication spectrum here as it pertains to the injured worker? Because we'll hit the employer here in a second.
Well, thank you. I think what we as agents really need to do is probably communicate what the expectation is to our clients from the get-go. Most accounts don't experience a work comp claim, annually, let alone every couple of years. And so when those happen, I think we owe it to our clients and the area injured workers just simply have a conversation about what that process is going to look like. Because I think that so many times, especially in smaller accounts, it's very subjective, it's very personal. And so to make sure that we get the right outcome for the injured worker, we really just need to communicate better with our clients and their staff in terms of what the actual process really looks like, what our role is, what the role of the company is, what the role of the claims adjuster is going to be. And then if there's a problem or a breakdown in that, reach back out to us, because we're here to help mend fences and solve problems. I'm not here to adjust your claim, but if there's a problem, please tell me, because we have resources and people we know at the companies to help bring that resolution back to a positive outcome.
Agree with that. So we've talked about the whole idea is that this is recovery. It's workers' recovery, and I think that Bob highlighted a very illustrative point, because when we look at, so this is actually kind of comical on this. So I'm a professor at Drake University, and I teach compensation and benefits, because originally on my resume when it said I was in charge of workers' compensation, they're like, oh, compensation, yes, you can teach that. I was like, sure, sounds great. And it's a lot of the same information though. It's a lot of the same of making information consumable. So when we look at when we're working with another human being, and Lisa, I've been on the patient side of this too, where I've actually been the injured worker, where I am bringing my patient status report in. It took 6 weeks for me to even find out who my adjuster was, which is just unbelievably disheartening and terrible for a plethora of reasons. But sometimes things happen. But when we look at this from an emotional intelligence and empathy standpoint, like I know Greg and I've had this conversation previously where we're talking about like establishing human connection, because this is not just looking at an injury to a body part. We are now working with a human being that is now being displaced from a lot of different components of their life, because again, humans are multifaceted, multi-emotional. There's a lot of components that make up a human. And so when we're looking at this, we're not just looking at somebody having a shoulder injury, but now we're looking at that person not being able to coach a child's team, whether it be basketball, softball, volleyball, etc. Or if they have young kids, they're not able to embrace them in the manner that they would, or even a spouse or a partner of some kind. So we look at it where it's just like, we have to fix the shoulder. No, we need to recover a human being to get them back into their life. And so I like this question that came into our chat box. I'm going to read this out loud for you guys. It says, while I don't like the workers' compensation moniker, it seems like renaming our system as workers' recovery is a little disingenuous. The system seems to be geared towards focusing on allowing the worker to recover enough to return to work and not focus on full recovery. Agree or disagree? If you have ever followed anything of mine, I'm going to go hard disagree on this, but I think it's more important that our panelists get to speak there. So, Bob, going to you first. Agree or disagree?
Thank God. Thank God. I totally disagree. I totally disagree.
I do too. Absolutely not.
I think that there's a big element. There is, to their credit, to the questioner's credit, the industry, as part of this shift, needs to focus on function versus return to work, return to function versus return to work. By the way, at your next webinar where you have Jennifer Wolf and Heather Lohr, ask them about return to function. They love to argue that with me or talk to me about that. It's been a big funny topic at IA. But in reality, if we can gear ourselves to really talk about quality of life issues, you mentioned walking the dog or something to that effect. You want to lift your grandchildren up. You want to restore that function. We should be able to concentrate on that. And the upshot is, if you can restore that function and those quality of life issues, you are also repairing them to the point where they can return to work. And let's not discount the importance of having a quality, productive role in society and getting people back into a producing role. You talk to plaintiffs' attorneys today, and some of them are very well-meaning people, a lot of well-meaning attorneys. it's a big win for them when they get permanent total disability. And to me, I think disability is a death sentence. I've said that before. I get in trouble for it because the people on disability, they are sicker, they're more depressed, and they die younger than the rest of us. It's not a healthy lifestyle. So don't discount the importance of talking about getting back to work, because you're really talking about returning people to a functioning, important role and reestablishing their self-worth. But we absolutely should focus on the function involved in everyday living, and that can be done under a concept of workers' recovery. It's not simply just changing a name. We are talking about changing an attitude, but it starts with that name.
Greg, what do you think? Agree or disagree?
Here's my thought on it. I'm gonna ride the middle, and here's why. I feel like the entire system has been built to focus on compensation and to focus on those aspects, and even the way the medical's handled, the way the state laws are set up. But just because it's set up that way doesn't mean we should do better. And that's, I guess, where I would go with it is, yes, as a whole, even the word adjuster, right? That's focused on the financial element of adjusting a claim. But we can do better than that. And I think when we do better than that, and the people who are trying to do better than that are going to pave the way for something that's better than what exists today. And that's going to benefit everybody. And it's going to take chances. It's going to take people who can see the big picture, because it is really hard. I'll tell you, with this pain coaching, it's really hard to quantify. Did that move the needle? If I am, right now we're doing an experiment on looking at what could happen if we sent edible arrangements to someone who has a surgery, or sent them a gift basket, right? How do you quantify that making a difference? But I can tell you what I know in my heart is that when my wife had surgery and a coworker brought over dinner, that mattered. So, I think those things matter, and I think that there are ways that we can get to tracking it. And just because the system is set up a certain way doesn't mean we can't do better.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree with that. And I think you illustrate a very good point on this. So you said that when your wife had surgery, because it was personal health injury. So of course everyone's going to shower with, like, let's bring food, let's figure out how we can help you with your kids. You label work comp, and you are now pushed to the side, and
you're a pariah. You're a pariah.
Pariah. Sorry, Greg. Goodbye. I'm just kidding. You are the weakest link. Goodbye. I'm kidding. All right, Lisa. Agree or disagree? The system. What do you think?
I am going to just answer it without an agreement or disagreement, but talk more globally. As a background in occupational therapy, our job is to really help people get back to their occupation. And occupation can be something as simple as knitting or gardening to performing their work. So as a medical professional, it's really focused on getting this person back to functioning. And I guess I feel the workers' comp system is really broken because it does focus on really just getting that person back to work, whether they enjoy what they're doing or not, and not really focusing on what's important to that person and allowing them to even function in their day-to-day tasks. So if we are able to make some minimal accommodation and they're going back to work and they're in pain, they're not physically present, or they're physically present, but they're not mentally and emotionally present at work because they're not able to enjoy the rest of their life outside of work. So I think we really need to look at the patient again from a holistic perspective in focusing on total functioning. Like you mentioned, Claire, that person with the shoulder injury, they're not just going in and doing data entry and that's their entire life. They might be a coach, their kid's soccer coach or baseball coach. They're doing things outside of work. And if they're not able to enjoy those things, they're not going to be productive at work, and they're not going to be able to do what they enjoy at work.
If I could just interject for 1 second, because I agree with much of what Lisa said, but I have to disagree with one point. In very few states is workers' comp really interested in returning people to work. We don't, as an industry, really focus on returning to work. You talk to any adjuster and they want to close that claim. Now, sometimes that's a return to work. A lot of times it's just settle and close. We're not interested in what happens to them after that point of settlement and closing, particularly in the larger injury claims. And I think we really do need to focus back on that return to work and function as an important part of what we do.
And I think this is a good time to highlight the state of Washington for naming it vocational recovery. So thank you to Washington State for leading the way. All right, Todd, agree or disagree?
So
Round us out.
I really love this question. We call it workers' compensation because that's the only thing people know. They know when they get injured, they're probably going to get some type of financial settlement, or they're going to get a paycheck. And that's from the commercials with attorneys to friends that have been injured. That's why we call it workers' comp. From the agent perspective, we talk to every single business owner about the need for a return to work program so they can minimize how big their mod swings and how much more they're going to pay in premium. So there is a fundamental reason that these businesses want to bring people back to work, even if they have pain, even maybe if they're not ready, because they're trying to minimize the cost of the claim so that they don't pay more in premium. Do I love the term workers' recovery? Absolutely. Should we focus more on the injured worker and making sure that they're taken care of before they come back to work? Absolutely. But the way the system is set up right now in terms of financial payment, whether that the business owner is going to pay, they're trying to bring people back as quick as possible to minimize maybe not being renewed, paying more, going to the assigned risk pool, whatever those things that down the road are going to be for them. That's why they want to bring people back to work. And that's what we're talking about.
Claire, can I add one thing here?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I feel, just to go back on what we're talking about on the workers' recovery side, I see a different perspective from the worker because they're coming in to me and saying, I don't care about my compensation. I don't care. I wasn't going to work to get injured. And I do, of course, want to get paid. But my main concern is getting back to function and whatever that takes. And so they're reaching out to people like us and saying, I'll even pay out of pocket so I can go back and be able to function if that's what it takes for me to be able to get the proper treatment. But I feel like my hands are tied because I'm not getting the adequate care that I need, or things are being delayed, or things are not being approved, and it's setting me back and I'm not getting paid. And it becomes kind of this violent storm of, I've now lost my house, I've lost my job, I've lost my overall well-being and being able to take care of my kids. And from the patient's perspective, again, I'm talking what patients are telling me is I just want to get back to work. I want to get back to function, and I want to be able to return to the life that I once had. So our job is really helping them and guiding them through the process and providing the resources. And as all of us has mentioned, thinking outside the box of really not working on the statutes and doing things a little bit differently, because yes, the compensation is part of it, but that is not the main concern of the worker, even though we might think they want the money, they want to close the case, and even on the employer end, but the patient wants to get better. They want to function, and that's where they want to be.
So Lisa, I'm going to share something with you in the state of Iowa that this is unique, right? So if an injured worker doesn't want to return to work in the state of Iowa, and they refuse written work, then they don't get paid anymore. That's the system here. So whether they're able to or not able to, if they choose not to, then there's no indemnification for them until they can return to work.
Do you think that that is a good system?
That's the system we have. I don't know that it's 100% fair. And I've never been the injured worker. I've never been unable to return to work. I don't know what somebody's pain level is. I don't know. I'm not privy to that side of the conversation, but what I am privy to is when the business owner calls and says, hey, we've had this person who was injured. We have offered them written return to work. They have refused. What's the next step? Well, the state statute in the state of Iowa is going to be, well, then you're not required to legally provide them a weekly indemnity check because they're not entitled to it because they're refusing work. Now, that's not the same in every state. That's just the way it is here right now.
I do think that highlights something, if I could add, that injured workers have responsibility in this process. They do. And that may be when it's time to go back to work, it's time to go back to work. You hate your boss, you don't like your job, and I understand that, but that's not what workers' comp is designed to compensate for. Part of what we're talking about today, though, is making sure that an injured worker or recovering worker coming into the system understands what those responsibilities are. And I think that, there's some interesting questions in the chat area. I'll let Claire handle it, but related to frequent flyers in the system and how to deal with that, that's an entirely different topic. And as I come to a comp from an employer perspective, and let's just say excessive documentation is a useful thing if you have an unsafe employee. But beyond that, I think that the workers do have responsibilities in the process, but a part of our job is to make sure they understand what those responsibilities are.
All right, Lisa, I'm gonna hop in here though. So as somebody that did create a workers' recovery unit for the adjuster side, there's a couple of things I think Bob's highlighted that I want to reemphasize as well. So when we talk about the system, workers' recovery versus workers' compensation, I agree and I disagree. I think we can make the system better, but it's up to every single person that we're going to talk about throughout this scope today to make it better. Like every single time my adjusting team picks up the phone, they have the single ability to make that person's life better by simply listening to them, hearing them out, and then figuring out the expectations and the accountability. You know what? You're lucky that I'm handling your claim, because here's what I'm going to make sure is done to make sure that we can get you back on your road to recovery. It is all about how you talk to people about things, but there's got to be accountability on both sides. So here's what you can expect of me in the state of Iowa or in Alabama. This is what you can expect from me, but then I also expect this back from you. And I think that that is where a lot of this disconnect comes from, is you've got adjusters that are rushing because they've got too many claims. We all know this, there's 1,000 reasons. But that's also up to, we hear about organizations that talk about this advocacy model, and I laugh about it. I do, because we've been talking about it since 2016, and I want to know why there's not 100 of me, because it shouldn't be that hard. But what it takes is it takes leaders that empower adjusters to make decisions like Greg's are, that are going to think outside the box, that we really look at, okay, what other ways can we get people to buy into their recovery while we help them? Like, and I'm with Greg on this, because while we do a lot of that emotional intelligence and we focus on the empathy and we look at ways, like my team does send cards. They're not branded by anything. They don't say CWG, they don't say Workers Recovery Unit. They are literally a card from Claire to Greg in a time that Greg doesn't feel awesome. And when we look at it as a recovery, and I'm going to use an example of a 70-year-old woman that we had, she wanted to get back to golfing with her grandkids. Well, you know what? If we focused on her getting that golf swing back, a lot of her work restrictions were within that whole idea of golfing and shoulder movement and whatnot. But you know what? It's more plausible for her and more enjoyable for her to think about golfing with her grandkids on a golf course in the middle of June. Well, if we start to think about how we frame things, and so I look at this from the chat box, like I see, don't you think that bringing people back is only going to further open additional liability? No, because number one, anyone that's a people leader has a responsibility to their employees to not ask them to do work outside of their restrictions. And number two, as an injured worker, you have your own responsibility to take care of your body. Get super passionate about this, and I know Bob will back me up on this, but there's accountabilities here. And you know what? I'm a human being that is in charge of me and myself. So when I get restrictions that I did have placed on me, it is up to me to make sure that I don't follow, or that I follow them. And if my employer would have asked me to step outside of that, I say no. And again, people leaders have to do a better job of this. One, the people leaders on the employer level need to understand, everyone should understand some element of human capital to start out with. Like, how do you actually take care of your employees? How do you make them engaged? How do you help foster that environment? But then also on the claims side, what are your leaders doing to support your adjusters? Because a lot of adjusters want to do the right thing, and they want to break down these red tape boxes that we have put people in, because not only have the states done it, but we have definitely beaten adjusters down to not give them any type of fun power to really think outside the box about what's good for this individual. And that is where I think the system was broken. We had a ton of people that really went through this. Let's do workers' compensation. It's going to be a checkbox. Well, guess what? That doesn't work in workers' compensation, because you're working with human beings. And it is all about human connection and emotional intelligence. And there's 1,000 studies that if we had more time, I would walk through why the science backs up what we do. Yet we don't have the top dog saying, yes, you should do that, unless you're like with Greg, where he's like, you know what, I don't have the ROI on this yet, but I know it's working. I know it's doing the right thing. I just need you to trust me. And we need more people like that go and challenge the system, so we don't have people saying, well, we just need to get the claims closed and whatnot. That if that's the way that your model is working, then I wouldn't want to work for your company, because one, your leaders, I understand the methodology behind it, but I wouldn't want to work for a company that wants me to treat other human beings like they're a paycheck and a checkbox and a let's move on and move forward. Sorry. Whew,
Well, tell us what you really think,
Okay.
Claire. I'm just stop beating around the bush.
Dude, there's a reason that I got this topic.
But one thing you said is interesting. Goes back to a comment that one of the audience members made. Is will this change in communication help attract younger people to the position? You are a millennial, are you not? Are you you're in the millennial phase?
I am a millennial.
You are a
My daughter
millennial.
will tell you I'm a baby boomer, but I'm not.
Well, well, I'm the boomer, so I'm the boomer in this room. So I think that type of change of focus, what you're talking about, is actually critical to drawing newer talent in. If we think we're going to attract talent to come sit in a cubicle and process 200 claims by talking to 800 voicemails every day, we got another thing coming. We got to change the focus of the way our industry operates. And we can do it, as Greg pointed out, we can save money, we can get better outcomes, and we can attract quality people to do it.
Well, and Greg, I think you've mentioned before, like if we start on talking about getting sociology majors, psychology majors, criminal justice majors, like what backgrounds do you look for when you're looking to work with injured humans?
So yeah, that's a really good question. And so early in my career, I hired the way I was trained. So, and that was the company I started with looked for business majors, looked for criminal justice majors, because that's what they felt like made a good adjuster. I'm a criminal justice major, so I guess I'm a
criminal
product of
justice.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, but
That's
what I
great.
will say, so what I found when I hired those individuals is they didn't stay in the industry. Every one of them moved on to underwriting. Some of them stayed in insurance, but I lost them as employees, and they were great employees, but they didn't feel fulfilled in what they were doing. And there are a couple pieces there I think are key. One is the job has to be fulfilling, or people aren't going to do it. Especially the current generation of people who are out there looking for jobs, they want to feel that. They want to feel like they're making an impact. It's really hard when the only impact you're making is on a financial sheet. So that's important, and I don't think that piece should be ignored, because we're not in the non-for-profit business if you're an insurance carrier. But that doesn't mean that we can't offer opportunities for people to feel like they're able to do meaningful work. And where we've had a lot of success has been thinking outside the box and looking for people who are great communicators. And what we've done is we've even transitioned people out of other industries into insurance that probably would never have been thought about. We hired a flight attendant. She's fantastic. Talk about dealing with high stress situations, with people packed on an airline who are upset. Whenever we have a issue with an injured worker, if she's on it, I know it's going to be handled well. Because she's a fantastic communicator. The employers that we insure love her because she calls them back right away, and she builds relationships with them. We hired a customer service manager, assistant manager at Publix. It's a grocery store. So you'd think, well, that's the grocery business. It has nothing to do with the financial sector. He is fantastic dealing with problems, because that's what he did. Is Publix is known as a white glove, we're going to do everything to make sure your experience is fantastic type of a company, groceries chain. And he takes that approach with our injured workers. And if I look at my own experience, so I'll give you two short examples. One is I had a situation with eBay. I sold something on eBay, believe it or not. And they charged me incorrectly. It was $30, right? So I should just let that go, that they hit me with a charge for $30. But I called them. It took 20 minutes to talk to anybody. After waiting for 20 minutes, I talked to somebody who told me that they couldn't do anything about it. It would have to be their manager, but their manager wasn't working, and they'd call me back in 3 days. 5 days go by, I never get a call. So I call them back. I talk to somebody now who's overseas, and they tell me that they're going to call me back in 3 days after fixing it. No one calls me back. So I call them back again, and eventually I get it refunded. Okay. A different situation, I ordered something online from a small store, and they had a handwritten letter there thanking me. They had my name on there, Dear Greg, okay, and asked, what else can we do? I immediately went back to them and purchased something from them within a month, because that was a really positive experience. And I think if we think of our injured workers, if you want to start an injured worker and put them in a bad mood to show you who's right, then do all of the things in the first example. Don't call them back. Don't answer their calls. Put them off. Tell them you can't fix their problem. Tell them it's their manager that can do it for them. By the time that's done, you're right. They want to stay off work, and they want to show you that they're going to that they're right, because you've created an environment.
You'll be talking to their lawyer.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So what if we could resolve this without attorneys? What if we could do the right thing, and in doing so, help people get back to work? And that's the other thing we do is our adjusters have lower case counts. Now we handle high hazard claims, but most of our adjusters have 90 or less claims because we expect them to call people back. We expect them to build those relationships, and we believe in doing that. We're going to have these claims are going to resolve a lot faster, and it's going to be a better outcome for everybody, which financially benefits the company as well.
All right. So I want to make sure that we continue to move on here, because while the injured worker is incredibly like the number one person that we need to talk about today, let's move on to the employer here for a second. And with that, when we look at the employer, Todd, I'm going to go to you first, because you talked about how, there's a lot of employers that they have no idea. Like all right, I know I need this insurance, but okay, I have this, and now what do I do? Okay, I've never had a claim before. Where do I even begin? So let's start with that, and the communication.
I don't even know where to start here. There is so many different types of business owners that don't experience work comp claims. They simply just don't know. And then that burden falls on us. And I don't even know that every single agent out there knows enough about workers' compensation to advise every business owner out there. We just don't deal with it enough. So to go back to your previous question about new generations coming into the workforce, absolutely. There are people like me, people like everybody on this panel that want to change exactly how workers' compensation is being handled, from the employer to the claim process to the injured worker. One of the things that we talk about on every single renewal right now is just some of the resources we have available. We talk a lot about nurse triage and instant claim reporting. I want to make sure that our businesses know it's okay to turn in a work comp claim, and it's okay to do that instantly and transfer that liability to a registered nurse and let them make the determination regarding care. Don't let the claim wait. Don't send them home overnight without reporting it. Don't let them go out on their own on a Friday night or Saturday on the weekend. Turn it into nurse triage, let the expert deal with it, get them in the system, and things will work its way out. That's the message that we've been pounding into employers for as long as I can remember lately.
Greg, you mentioned that you guys are thinking about sending like an edible arrangement or whatnot. What about training our employers to do that?
I think that's a fantastic idea. One of the things having worked for a state fund versus where I work now, one of the things that's different is we get to pick our partners. And so we're pretty careful with that. So because we do write high hazard insurance, it's really important for us that the insureds have a program to work with their injured worker. And a lot of our employers, a lot of these folks are family too. So it's a little different than when you're dealing with a very large organization like a Home Depot or something that's national. So I do think that's really important. And I think where we've had success has been partnering with agents and working together with the insureds to get the best outcome. And we've had a lot of success in doing that. And when we haven't had the right fit, we talk about it. And in our underwriting department, we'll roundtable with our claims department, we'll work with the agent. And if we can't get to a place where we're all seeing this through the same lens of working together, then it's probably not the right partnership for us. And we're okay with that. And sometimes that's going to happen.
Bob, what have you seen in the industry? You kind of see it all, but.
Well, I think sometimes employers can be their own worst enemy, but I think a lot of it comes from ignorance about what workers' comp is and what it's supposed to do and the protections it affords. You talk to most small businessmen and they'll tell you that workers' comp is a pain in the ass expense that they have to pay for. They don't understand the exclusive remedy or the liability limitations that come along with it. I think that the other thing too is when someone is injured, that injury sometimes costs not just the employee their job right at the time, it costs them their social network. They bowl with the same people they work with who suddenly stop calling. The boss doesn't call. No one talks to them anymore. We hear that all the time. We hear that in our discussion forum. And one of our challenges as an industry, and there's a great to hear that insurers are working to educate and partner with the employers. We go to conferences, we talk, we have webinars like this, and yet the people that are involved are insurers, we have insurance professionals, and we may have some large self-insured, perhaps self-administered employers who are engaged and active. over half the employees in this country work for mom and pop operations. They're not watching this webinar. They're not going to conferences. We're not reaching them at all. We spend an inordinate amount of time all talking to ourselves, and we're not really reaching the people that we really need to get to help make sure that that claim isn't torpedoed by the time it hits the adjuster's desk, because it can be completely torpedoed by the way the employer handles it. You know, sending the by the way, I'll let you know what hospital I'll be in tomorrow after my surgery, because edible arrangements would be really nice to have, Greg. I think that's a nice touch. So I'll message you afterwards what hospital I'll be in. But I think that getting an employer to send flowers to there's a story out of Saskatchewan. The ex-CEO of the Saskatchewan WCB told me about one of their employees. And their employers actually went by and mowed the employee's grass because he noticed it needed to be mowed. And the guy showed up to work the next week. They'd been trying to get him back to work and they couldn't. But as soon as the supervisor showed up and mowed the lawn, he went back to work. It's just a matter of showing that you care and that you understand that the impact is significant in their lives. And employers aren't good at that. And I'm not sure what the challenge is. Educating the employer, or what, I'm not sure how that challenge can be met, because educating the employer is a huge component of this.
You know, and I think that a lot of people get nervous because they think, oh my gosh, it's work comp, it's supposed to be private, we're not supposed to do anything. But I can tell you again, from my scope as an injured worker, our CEO texted me the very next day and said, hey, just wanted to make sure surgery went okay. How you doing? Doesn't ask about my medical information, doesn't ask about any of the stuff. Just like, hey, I'm a human. Hey, Lisa, how are you? How you doing today? Just checking in. And it was fantastic.
Absolutely.
He was so good at doing that.
Yep.
And it takes like nothing, but I love it when I hear from employers and they're coming to call and they're like, so-and-so hasn't called me back to give me an update on the status of this claim. And I love asking, okay, well, when's the last time that you talked to Greg?
Right.
Well, when Greg filed the claim, we just kicked it to you. But when's the last time you've talked to him?
Yeah.
Well, you handle that. But isn't Greg still your employee?
Yep. It's true.
So there's no other way to make somebody feel more isolated and on an island than when we do that. Lisa, from the physician or from the medical standpoint, where are we missing the boat with employers?
I think for the employers, it starts really on the preventative approach first, and really trying to implement some strategies to keep the employees safe, number one, and working with the insurance companies and providing this approach. But employers don't always realize that your indirect costs associated with the injury are about 7 times what your direct costs are. And that being said, when we look at reasonable accommodation for an employee to go back to work, the research shows it's less than $500 per employee for reasonable accommodation. So if we can reasonably accommodate this employee going back to work with a chair, with a proper equipment, and really advocating for them to minimize the additional expenses, those indirect costs that occur, by assuming some responsibility of the environment that they're working in. So let's make sure that the environment is safe for this person to return to work. And in doing so, as I mentioned, it can be less than $500. And I see all the time as a medical practitioner where we're making restrictions for a person to return to work. Someone mentioned about light duty status and the employee doesn't want to do that. The reason why we recommend light duty status is we don't want this person getting re-injured. Yes, they might not want to do this activity long term, but there's objectivity to it, and there's a reason of the repetitive nature of their work. So we have to minimize that repetitive nature. We have to look at objectivity as far as the physical demands that are coming from the employer. And then lastly, really working with that employer to say, if you can implement these small changes within the environment, then these people can return to work safely and work more efficiently and be more productive in the workforce and be happier. And so you're now going to have a productive employee versus an employee that's going to be going out and claim again and again and again.
I absolutely agree with what Lisa said, but I have to add, part of the education is to let employers know that those light duty jobs need to have value and provide some dignity to the employee. Counting paper clips is not a real job. And we've all heard the employer that says, well, they can come back to my office and count paper clips. And that is just your lost time claim waiting to happen.
Yeah. So I know we've got about 11 minutes left, so I want to be mindful. So I know we could talk about this next topic forever, and I'm sure we all have a very significant opinion of this. So from the adjuster standpoint, I want to start with Todd because I think Todd gets hit in a different way on this. So Todd, from the adjuster state.
From the adjuster standpoint, I think the first line right there, over communication is the name of the game. Whether it's over communication or miscommunication, both of those things lead to a loss in productivity and a poor claim outcome. Most of the time where we get brought in on any type of a claim is something that somebody didn't understand what was said, and they don't think it's right, and then they're reaching back out to the agent. And so we're trying to piece together what was said or what wasn't said or what the intent was. Really, if you just put the injured worker at the center of it, over communicate, make sure they understand what you're communicating and being receptive to their questions, I think that would solve a lot of problems and help a better outcome.
I'm focusing about 4 or 5 bullet points down where it costs nothing to be a good human.
I was thought that too.
And I think
that doesn't matter what jurisdiction you're in.
It doesn't.
You
and
can
no
be
matter
nice
what,
when you answer the phone.
and that's a point. And here's the thing: no matter what jurisdiction you're in, we are bound to state statute, but we're not necessarily bound by state statute. And what I mean to that, I'll point to Greg's example. There's nothing in any state statute anywhere in this country that says you have to or cannot send edible arrangements to an injured worker after they've had surgery. There's nothing in state statute that says you can or cannot hire Take Courage coaching or some coaching operation to help support that injured worker emotionally in the process. And by the way, along those lines, I recommend you look at your pharmacy spends with a successful coach, because they have tremendous records in reducing pharmacy dependence in those cases, those coaches. We can go beyond statute, and so often, because it doesn't mean we're bad humans, but we always cite statute and we hide behind statute. You can exceed statute and still get better outcomes and save money in the process.
I love that.
100%.
We need to quote that. Greg, quote that. Send that to Taylor.
Actually, bound by statute, there's going to be probably a blog title, I think. I've just figured that out. So
okay.
But you're free to quote.
Greg, come on. Greg, you're a leader of leaders of adjusters. All right. So when you're looking at how to effectively lead these people that are frontline, where do you go? Where do you go?
So let me say it starts with me. It starts with my modeling. And I would say that for any leader. Look at yourself and ask yourself, how often do I talk to the people who report to me? Do I set up regular time to answer their questions? Am I available when they need it? When they have a surgery or something goes wrong in their life, am I there for them? Those are all basic human things, but if we don't do it with the people who report to us, how could we ever expect them to do it to our injured workers? And so I think that's key, to start with yourself. And I would say, if you are a leader and you're listening to this, look for ways to push yourself to be a better listener. Look for ways to push yourself to learn how to show empathy. It's not always natural for everybody. It wasn't for me. I think when we got married, my wife said I was the least empathetic human being she'd ever met. So I think we've all maybe had that moment, right? In the first year of marriage. And so I have 5 children now and have been married 17 years. So she's still with me. So, but my point in all that is, we have to look at ourselves, and we have to be able to listen and help others and show people how to behave. And then I think when we see it within our teams, we have to call it out when it's working and when it's not working. So when I see 2 adjusters collaborating together and it's going really well, I'm like, that was amazing. We need more of that. How do we get more of that? And I think if we can do those things internally, it will spill externally as well. Not that we shouldn't do it externally as well, but I think it starts with how we behave.
Well, I think when you're looking at it from attracting and retaining and developing talent, like, I don't want to work for somebody that just wants us to check boxes and push paper. Like, I was asking one of my classes this, and I was like, so what would avoid you guys from going into the insurance industry? And they're like, we don't want to be chained to desks pushing paper. Like, oh, no, you can like actually interact with human beings. That's not the perception that we have within, younger generations. So, Lisa, I want to hit on medical professionals real quick before we end up with our time. So, Lisa, communication with medical professionals. And I know you touched on this when we started, but I really think.
Can I talk about the adjustment real quick? Because I think that's important, that cheaper is not always better. And I think it's really important for the adjusters to really look at from our perspective of outcome-based medical care. Because a lot of times, and I'm speaking for many medical professionals, we feel that our services are cut short. I've been in the industry for 25 years, and I'll have adjusters reach out to me and say, well, we want to work with you. And I'll say, well, here's how we provide our service. And I quote out our fee, and they say, well, that's too much, without even knowing that our outcomes are better than many other outcomes that are out there. And just a quick side story, we have been working with, and I won't mention any names, an insurance company really closely. And we had an injured worker, and the adjuster called and said, what does it take to get this person back to work? I said, well, let's do an ergonomic analysis, see what is required for this client. I will personally purchase the equipment for the client if you reimburse me. Within 2 weeks, we did the analysis. We got the client his equipment. I put it on our company credit card, and the insurance company wrote a check and reimbursed me, and the client's back at work. 2 weeks. So there wasn't all this red tape that had to be cut for us to be able to go through that process. We're willing to do it as medical professionals, but when we're really cut with our reimbursement and we're not looking at outcome-based treatment, it's not fair to the medical professional to say, we want you to do this service and you want you to provide the best service at a low reduced cost. We can't do it.
All right, so we've got 4 minutes left. So Lisa, anything else that you want to touch on regarding the medical professional side? And then I want to close it out with Bob and jurisdictional statutes.
And I think I touched base on this earlier, is most importantly, and it doesn't even have to be a medical professional, I think for all of us sitting here on this panel, letting the injured worker know it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have fear. It's okay to have concern. It's okay to be angry. And it's okay to realize that you're going to have to change your mindset from a victim mindset to a creator mindset. I have the ability to empower and change my own life. And if I sit there and say, woe is me, I am so upset that this happened to me, I got injured, I got sick, why did this happen to me with this employer? They're being mean to me, the adjuster's not talking to me. We really need to help empower that person that it's in your mindset and you have to be able to create your own destiny, but it's also okay to cry. It's okay to be fearful, and we're here to listen. We're here to help you. We're here to help find the root cause of your problem, whatever that may be. And I'm not here just to push pain medication and tell you that good luck at work and I'm putting you on light duty and then come back and see me again in 6 weeks and go to physical therapy. That is not the job of the medical professional. We should be listening, we should be engaging, we should be vulnerable. And I think that's for all of us, anybody in the workers' comp space. We really need to let the patient know we're here for them and helping them with changing their mindset of, I'm a victim. It's very stressful and very difficult. And the impact of stress on the body and the physiological changes that occur that can result in these chronic pain and chronic injury and chronic illness is significant. Keep the stress down, let the patient know it's okay to be okay, and help create a positive mindset for that patient.
Thank you. All right, Bob, round us out.
I think
statutes and regulations.
Sure. And this is the area where we have the least amount of control. Unfortunately, workers' comp is a very confusing industry because it's managed by all 50 states, DC, federal, longshore, all the various jurisdictions. And in most cases, the laws are crafted by people who actually don't know anything about workers' compensation. I often feel for the regulators. We've got a lot of really good regulators in our industry. They care, they're committed, but they are working with the legislation that has been provided them. And I think that ultimately for, Claire, your vision and my vision of workers' recovery to really become a reality is we need change at the jurisdictional level. I need one state to name their system the workers' recovery system to start that process, just to change that mindset. But that's where it has to start. Absent of that, and that may not happen in my lifetime, we'll never know. We'll keep banging that drum and see. I think we have to recognize kind of what I alluded to earlier is we have to follow statutes, but that doesn't have to be our only guiding light. We have other things we can do. We can be good humans. We can listen. We can be compassionate. And in some cases, I don't mean it in an illegal sense. You work around the statutes that may be in your way. You have to follow the law, but there are things you can do around it that improve the situation that do not violate the law. And I really think that we need to do that because in terms of where we're headed, I certainly hope there's been an awful lot of discussion in the last 5-10 years, particularly in the last 5, about changing the mindset and changing the focus. And I think we just need to keep banging that drum, and eventually we will get there at the legislative level. But until then, we really need to work at changing our own attitudes and think of this as the recovery system and not the compensation system until those laws can get changed. But whenever you have an opportunity, talk to your state legislatures, talk to your regulators, and see what you can do to get changed in your own state.
Awesome. Well, it is 2 o'clock, and so while I would love for some more Q&A, I am going to put up thank you. I know, Lisa, there was a question in the chat box that I do want to hit because this person wants to use this. It says, Lisa, would you please share where the indirect stats are coming from? We would love to use these in our buildings to support the effort of bringing transitional work back into the factory.
Oh, she's muted.
Oh.
I have to mute it because of the dog. Sorry, everybody. I'm happy to post it, but it's in many different research articles. I don't have one off the top of my head, but I don't know if we have the person that posted that. I can send that over to them. I believe the information can also be found on, let's pull it up here real quick.
Well, you know what? I can have that person email you so that we stay cognizant of our time on this webinar. So if you would like to email Lisa. Otherwise, if you have any further questions, our emails are all there. Bob and I like to talk about this right and left. Todd has a podcast called The Comp Effect. Greg and I have a podcast called Adjusted. You have plenty of people here that are trying to change the landscape. And all we need is a couple more voices to continue to join us and to move that forward and to be a better communication model in this space. So with that, thank you to my awesome panel. I know it would be colorful and dynamic. And with that, we will be back on April 1st for webinar 5, coming from Jen and Heather with IABC. And Bob, you have been specially requested by them to make sure that you are here.
Okay.
So with that,
I'll be here.
thank you guys.
All right.
We will see you again for our next transitions webinar.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.